Hey everyone, welcome back to the Florida Relocation Guide YouTube channel. My name is Adam Hancock, and today we have a special guest with us, David Salkin, who's not only a realtor on my team, but also relocated just like you guys through YouTube from the Northeast United States to Lakewood Ranch, Florida. And when we were talking through his story, we realized this isn't Dave, this is everybody, right? So today we are going to discuss 5 or 6 really important issues that I think a lot of people can find a lot of value from. So we hope you enjoy, and let's hop in. First bullet number 1, outdoor Florida lifestyle. So question for you, Dave. When 300 plus days of sunshine, we all hear that it is beautiful here. I'm from here, so maybe tone deaf to the winter months, but I understand it's hard in New Jersey in the winter. But I'm assuming at some point from your time here, it's gotten too hot, you got tired of it. What's your thought on weather after being here for post year?
So let's take it in 2 halves. First of all, we're filming this February. My family and friends back in New Jersey are looking at the weather crying because it's dark and cold, and every day looks like it might be getting darker and colder. So we live in a place where people go to be on vacation. And so we're sitting here on the rooftop bar in downtown Sarasota overlooking the water, and we just call this Thursday. So it's not a bad place to be. In terms of the summer, does it get hot? Yeah, it gets really hot. And I have a pool in my backyard that I can jump into, or I can drive to the beach and have access to literally some of the finest beaches in the United States. Siesta Key, Lido Beach, up in Longbow. I can go to Anna Maria Island. There's so many places where the sand is powder, water's crystal clear. It looks like you're in the Caribbean. So it's not terrible when it's really hot. And then with the money I saved by not paying state income tax, it pays for a trip to Europe, someplace cool in August, September. So was it a good trade? Yeah, it was a good trade.
So it's in terms of you're a guy that enjoys outdoor stuff, I guess is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
In terms of hobbies, one thing I always thought was, I moved very briefly to Asheville, North Carolina. Regrettable, but I at least saw the other side. And I wouldn't even say that's cold compared to the Northeast. And it sacrificed all the things I underestimated about I could do all year. You have a pool in your backyard, not usable, not functional, but all those things as far as balance of life, if you're someone that works out and likes to go outside and do that kind of thing. So can you talk to kind of like, you were someone that already fished and you were a diver. So in Florida, how is that different? As far as like, do you actually use that? Do you actually go to the beach more? Do you use that stuff more?
I have fished, spearfished, and scuba dived more in the last year than I did probably in 3 previous combined. So in New Jersey, we fished a lot in New Jersey, but you were late spring. So by, maybe April, you were trying to get out there, and it was still pretty cold. Sometimes in March, it was still pretty cold striper fishing. And then by, October, maybe beginning of November, if you stretched it, that's where your season was. And the beginning and the end was cold and sometimes really rough on a little boat trying to go out 80 miles in the Atlantic. Here in the bathtub, we've got 300 beautiful days a year. I've been on the boat here where we're fishing and you get hot, you jump in and swim around for a while. Or I grab my spear gun and I swim down to the bottom and shoot a fish if they're not coming up. So, lifestyle, fantastic. If you're somebody that likes to fish, spearfish, scuba dive, this is where you want to live. And then if you don't want to go, let's say, over the top and you're not into all those things, well, I want to go for walks, like just to be healthy and exercise. It's so much easier to go walk or ride your bike, or if you're a runner or whatever. Almost every day is going to allow you to do that without thinking about the fact that tomorrow's going to be, -6 and I'm not going outside.
Yeah.
So I think if you're an outdoor person and you want to be active because it's healthy or because you just like hobbies that have to do with outside, this is where you want to be. And then on top of that, a day like today, we're filming here on top of the rooftop bar. Downtown is popping today. People are going to be outside having lunch. It's February. I don't know what part of the country you're watching this from, but are you sitting outside in February having your lunch? Because I think you're probably not if you're watching this video. But we do this 10 months a year. You're sitting outside. I'm never going back. Never going back.
Yeah, I felt like in my brief tenure, I felt like I'm not even, you could run outside and all that kind of stuff, but I just felt like it was harder to be consistent with anything because it hurts to wake up. it's harder to do everything. It's like the path of tough resistance.
Yes.
So here, like you have an off day or whatever, it's like so much easier to have 7 days to have a try at something.
And let me brings up something else as you're talking. Most of my clients are from out of state. I would say almost 99% of them are from out of state, looking to move to Florida. That's basically we're relocation specialists. And when they all come down, they all start immediately asking questions about living by the beach, because you've come here on vacation, it was a beach vacation, and you associate your time in Florida being at the beach. But here's the thing. In New Jersey, it was from Memorial Day to Labor Day was sort of your beach season, and it wasn't all of it. It was really more like June, July, August was really when it was going to be, hot enough to enjoy the beach, and then the water was only warm enough in like maybe August, September. So when you come here, this sense of urgency, like I got to get to the beach, it goes away because the beach is there all year long. And, in August, when you're in the water in the Gulf of America, that I've renamed it, the water temperature is going to be 88 degrees. So you can walk in and out. You don't even know you got wet. It's like it's a bathtub. For me, I love it. It's fantastic. But you can live in Lakewood Ranch where I am, and I can drive 40 minutes and be at the beach, enjoy the beach. And when I do it and it's a beach day, it's a great beach day. But I don't have to do it every week. I don't have to do it, on a regular basis because it's not going anywhere. And I think that when people change that mindset to understand you don't have to live, at the shore to enjoy the Florida beaches, you've got 12 months of beach.
Love it. All right. So another interesting point I thought you made was the length of the day, like specifically to Southwest Florida. So talk to what you realized when you were looking across the state of Florida when you were moving about the length of the day.
It's just an observation. Florida is a really big state. And obviously we know it's a long state, but it's also fairly wide. We're Eastern time zone. When you're in Miami and the sun comes up, it comes up at the same time as it did when I lived in New Jersey. But on the West Coast, it's an hour later almost by the time the sun hits the West Coast. So the days are longer. It starts an hour later, but it also ends an hour later. So the end of the day, when you want to be outside and have dinner, you're still going to catch a great sunset. It might be 7 or 7:30 at night, and it still, feels like it's about dusk. Where at home, that might happen an hour earlier. It just makes for me, a longer, more cheerful day.
All right. So the second thing I want to talk about is housing comparison. So I would say, if not one of the biggest kind of surprises to people when they first come here, especially from the Northeast United States, Illinois, Washington, D.C., New Jersey, New York, is they're downsizing from these. If you had a family house there, you're talking like people are 4,500 square feet with a basement. So when they want to downsize here, they're not thinking 2,200 square feet, 15 feet apart between the neighbors, and then paying a premium for that. So I thought it was really interesting how you looked at reorienting money to the house. So can you talk to a little bit about the differences in that?
Sure. And it is a little bit of a shock when you first think about coming from, in my case, New Jersey, but any place I think in the Northeast where they're building the typical center hall colonial, 2-story, half acre. I mean, there's a very common sort of house plan that exists in a lot of places in the U.S. And you come down here and it's half the size. And you're looking online, you're saying, that sounds really small to me. And then you walk into this house and you're like, oh, it doesn't feel small at all. Why is that? And I'll tell you why it is, because it's an open floor plan with a lot of light, 2 big sliders in the back of the house, lots of windows, 14-foot or 12-foot ceilings. A small footprint can feel very spacious and cheerful and bright, and it's a different lifestyle. So I'm in a ranch now as compared to my 2-story, 3,200 square foot house with a full basement that was the bar and the man cave for football and all that stuff. Well, here, so we're empty nesters. We have about a 2,500 square foot house called a Lazio model at Esplanade Azario. And I remember when we first landed on this house as going to be our house, thinking, are we making a mistake? Is this too small? And so my wife and I were sitting in our den back in New Jersey before we pulled the trigger, and we're talking about square footage. And I said, when was the last time you sat in the living room and dining room, which was the other half of the house? And we just stared at each other and started laughing. And the answer is, well, Thanksgiving or Christmas. So twice a year, we used that half of the house, which was probably, I don't know, it was another 800,000 square foot that we just never used. There's no need for that. So now the Florida floor plan is pretty smart how they have allocated the space. The communal living, which is your great room and your kitchen. And if you're like me, you like to cook, all life revolves around the kitchen. When you're entertaining, we're cooking, we're drinking, we're having fun, we're laughing. It's going to be in the kitchen and this shared space that At home, they might have called it a den or a living room, and down here, you call it the gathering room, right? So your kitchen gathering room is all wide open, lots of glass. My sliders are typically wide open, which leads to the lanai, which I'll talk about in a second. But that's a lot of square footage. So the house where we actually use the house is plenty big enough. Where's the rest of the square footage? Well, the master suite and bathroom and master closet is way bigger than what I had at home. So I'm totally happy with that. Where do we cheat? Well, the 2 extra guest rooms are maybe 11 by 12 or 11 by 14. I mean, are they small? Kind of. Enough room for a queen and a couple of end tables and a bureau, but no one ever uses it other than a few times a year when they're visiting for a weekend or whatever. I'm not worried about that. And then where's the other space? The other space doesn't appear on your floor plan. I have a very large lanai, and I caged as far back as I could with my setbacks. So in my backyard, I've got an outdoor kitchen, I've got a dining room table, I've got a couch and chairs with a big screen TV on the wall, and then behind that, I've got a hot tub in my pool and lounge chairs. Where do I live? I live in my cage. I mean, we call it a cage because there's screens, because we don't want mosquitoes and bugs and lizards and stuff running around the house, and my doors are open quite a bit. So this outdoor space, when the doors are open, is contiguous to your indoor space, and it feels like another room in your house, and it's the most popular room in my house. I cook outside as often as I cook inside. I watch football on Sundays in a pair of shorts, in and out of the hot tub. I can't do that back in January in New Jersey. So I think the floor plans are different. You got to wrap your head around it a little bit, but when you come in here and you walk a few of them, you will understand that a center hall colonial that you're used to from other parts of the country would not work here. And there's a neighborhood here where some of those floor plans kind of exist, and I have yet to sell anyone one of those homes. That if people come in and out, we look at it, and then we go somewhere else and this is much more cheerful. So I think that's one of the biggest differences. The other one you brought up was the size of the lot. Mm-hmm. So at home, I had, half an acre plus. Here, you have a cute little front yard for your driveway and some nice little garden area. It looks beautiful. You have 0 side yard. You've got 2 little swales for the water to run to the back. And where's all your property? It's behind your house. And in my case, I tried to make it all inside the screen as much as possible. So I took my cage and built it straight out. They've got a landscape screen, meaning there's no struts running, vertical bars. And so I don't even know it's there. When I'm sitting in my backyard looking at the pond behind my house, I feel like I live on a lake, and you don't even notice the screen. And that's the space that we use, and it's great.
Yeah, I think unbelievable points. And I think the other couple of things I see that are like hurdles for people, I think clothing, I think people underestimate how less. I mean, not only is it hot and you just don't use, but like coats, boots, especially women, like you just don't have seasons. You don't have seasons of clothes that change. So you don't need to store that stuff. You don't put on a raincoat to go to your car. I think
we had 2 wardrobes at home. You had your winter and your summer, and you did a switch.
Yeah.
And invariably, when you were switching, it got hot right afterwards. You had to go digging for stuff, whatever. But like the bulky clothes, the sweaters, the heavy stuff that took up a lot of space in your closet, it no longer exists.
Yeah.
You're going to keep your favorite coat and put it away somewhere and use it when you go home to visit. But how many days a year are you going to use it here? I don't know, 5.
Yeah, it's something people don't realize probably until they're already here. And then I think family visiting is a big thing. And I think the floor plan efficiency at certain models, like the Lazio and the Palazzo at Taylor Morrison, great examples of it. The Savannah and the Kiowa and Neil, same thing. They're built in that orientation. Like they really were thoughtful that people wanted large single families. But what they did with the other rooms, it wasn't really missed on them. There was going to be other people visiting, but they planned 2 people to live there as a homestead. So the second bedrooms are always en suites, so it has a proper guest with the bathroom inside of it. They always leave that half bath outside, so you don't always have to enter a bedroom. The dens are always weirdly large.
They thought about this.
Yeah, they really thought about it. So I think that stuff it's really sneaky and kind of sleeper stuff when it comes to the equation, but same kind of conversation.
For sure.
Okay, the third major point we wanted to speak about before we talk about like what you could actually do, right? We're not going to just give you a bunch of information without a solution, is the idea of exiting a state. So I've been hot on the idea that it's not only do people want to come to Florida, it's at least equal or maybe more important that they want to leave where they're at. Now, Florida might be the best landing spot, maybe Texas is a second to that, or North Carolina, but leaving the state spurs the decision of like, I love my job, they're treating me like crap, I'm going to look at other jobs, they pay me more money, now the grass is greener. That's what spurred where you even look for another option where you didn't even consider it in the past, right? So exiting the state of what has kind of happened in the last couple of years to create that environment, I thought it's interesting. So we're going to kind of riff on some of those points. The first one being controversial one, but we'll keep it vanilla, is politics. So what this is a little bit of your history, your world. So what's your thought on that?
So there's an old analogy about if you had a pot of boiling water, you threw a frog into it, it'd immediately hop out. But if you put him into tepid water and you turn up the heat, you'll cook the frog because it happens so slowly, he doesn't even know what happened. And coming from New Jersey, it's like you just are abused for so many years with your taxes that you just think the whole world must live like this. And then you start having conversations with people from other places like Florida, and you realize there are alternatives out there that just, you almost want to smack yourself in the head and go, why didn't I do this a really long time ago? And I think, and as a realtor, I don't talk politics with my clients, but they talk to me and they vent and I listen and I nod my head because I was at the same place. You get to a point where the water's boiling and you're just done. And I think COVID brought a lot of it to a head because people were now locked down by states that were just, overregulated states to begin with and overreaching governments that had been overreaching for decades. And you started to feel so abused that you're like, I just want to go someplace where I really feel like I live back in America. And yeah, welcome to America. I live in Florida. I absolutely love it here. I take a deep breath and decompress, just walking outside. It's just a whole different thing. And the clients that I talk to who are leaving their states, they're almost at the point of anger. When they talk to me and they talk about where they're coming from, they may have lived there their whole life and they're angry that they have to leave, but they feel that they have to leave. Why? Taxes, crime, because their state governments where they are soft on crime. They don't feel safe in their own communities anymore. There's a lot of stuff that comes into conversations that have nothing to do with real estate, but I can totally empathize. And that's why I'm happy I live here and you will be too.
Yeah. So politics brought up a lot to me as well. And I think it gets the blood boiling and it's just like another thing. It's like, it just feels like you're piling it on. And then here is so different and maybe neither one's perfect.
Right.
But I think it's that wanting to escape the idea. But then what happens though, is politics are one part of it. And you're saying, okay, so you start looking around in Florida and you're like, holy shit, that's what you can get. You can get that all here. And I'm paying that with 2 roommates or with in the city. And so then it alerts you to like the price advantages. And it's not just the principle of the house. It's almost everything. So then you're like, a lot of the reason that people were originally those states is because their family's there, they're from there, that's where their job's at. But if you take off those chains, it's a lot easier to solve that problem. So I think beyond the stuff that probably makes you mad, cost becomes the absolute no-brainer because it's not just state income tax, it's all of it. It's almost all of it.
Yeah, so to go from New Jersey to New York, you're paying, I think it's almost like $20-something now to go through a tunnel or a bridge. And if you use the Sunshine Skyway Bridge, which is this massive structure goes across Tampa Bay, it's $1.50. And if you have the Sun Pass, it's less than that. They give you a discount. So like the first time you go over a major bridge down here and you realize it's like $1 and you think about the Lincoln or the Holland or the George Washington, it's 20-something. It makes you mad that you paid this. Like if you commute to the city every day, 5 days a week, you're paying hundreds of dollars for the privilege of driving in and out of really bad traffic. And, the roads in and out of Sarasota here, I mean, they could get busy too, but it's nothing like the tri-state area. And it's still much, much, much better here.
Yeah. So I think one thing to look at is like whether your house is, people get caught up on, granted, right? I want to be like fair here and I'm going to talk about perspective, but just caught up on, I do the same, is cost versus cost when you're comparing something that you've been looking at for a long time, right? So you looked at Florida in 2020 and then you look at it now and you're like, yeah, the difference is big. But if you would have looked at in 2023 for the first time, now you're looking at the difference of where you're from. And it's not perspective of something you never even bought. Like you weren't here in 20 and you're not here in 23. So if you looked at it fresh with fresh eyes,
right,
then you need to, then I think when you buy something, it's not the difference in the principle of that house. It's the idea that you're not being bled to death. Because I feel like it's the way cost structure. If your cost is in taxes and fees, then you're not paying for what you own. You're not paying for the thing. You're paying for something that never goes away, variable cost, can't control it. And I think Florida does a good job on at least even if the price rises, you're at least buying the thing.
And
So
you've
yeah,
got these gated communities and planned communities like in Lakewood
yeah,
Ranch, let's say. And so I pay an HOA of about $350 a month. And you say, well, that's a lot. What does that include? Well, it includes all of my lawn care. That's the cutting, the shrubbery, mulching, the chemicals, all that stuff. And at home, I probably pay $3,000 a year to have somebody do all that stuff for me because I didn't do it. I was working. So that $3,000, that's almost what I was paying in the HOA. What else do I get? Well, I have access to a gym. What does it cost you for your gym membership? Oh, and I have a community pool, and I have pickleball, and I have tennis, and I have a zillion other sports and activities. There's going to be a community pool with a restaurant, bar. Like, there's just a ton of stuff right in my community that if I were to think about a la carte, what it would cost me to have all this stuff, it's way cheaper just paying the HOA, and I don't have to touch anything. It's all taken care of. It's a nice way to live, and I compare my property taxes here to what I was paying in New Jersey. It's much less. So, I think no matter where you're from in the country, when you do those side-by-side comparisons, you're going to realize you come out ahead to live in 300 perfect days a year.
yeah. I think there's a takeaway is that, like, again, nothing's perfect, and Florida's not as cheap as it was. But if that's your excuse for not doing something, and you think that talking about the Florida lifestyle is delusional, which I'm an economics guy, so I never talk about like just do something recklessly without it, just as a quality of life conversation. I'm never that first. But if you lay apples to apples as far as like what a CDD is, and most people aren't familiar, it's in your tax base, but that tax hits a principal that's far less. And then there's not 400 items that come after that get tacked onto it. Then in most cases, it's at least even. If we're not talking like versus Wisconsin or something, it's at least even. And if that was the hindrance of why you didn't move because the price is 40 grand more than it was 3 years ago, then I think it's something to take a second look at. All right. So if you made it to this point, then, we've talked about a lot. And like I said, we're not trying to be pie in the sky here. And more importantly, you've heard housing crash and you've seen what the builders are doing. You've seen all these things coming out. And it's really hard to know what to do if you're doing something too early and there's going to be a better incentive and all these kind of things. So what we want to do from here is we want to give you some tangible ways to navigate in a shifting market to our knowledge, and maybe be even opportunistic if you look at it the right way. First one I'm seeing right off the bat is less demand. Less demand is never a bad thing for a buyer. Now, do I think there's a lot of reasons we're not, which I've been talking about a lot, there's a lot of reasons we're not going to shift to a buyer's market? Yes. I mean, it's going to be very hard to get the inventory in, especially in the Sarasota, Florida area specifically, to a point where buyers have some large leverage vantage point. But the fact of the matter is less people are competing for every single house. That's always going to help. It's always going to make people antsy, but it's not going to just make a magic trick of like all this stuff happen unbelievably and there's always going to be the perfect house. But it will let you actually be patient and make a poised decision, which you should be able to do every single time. You're not going to feel like you lost something awesome if you wait a weekend, right? So I think less demand is a very important first step. What are you saying?
So, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier, where I'm probably in 20 or 30 different communities, new construction with clients every month. And I have my favorites. And the great ironies of life, my favorites happening to be my clients' favorites. And apparently it's everybody else's favorites too. And what I mean by that is the nicest house and the nicest lot, the nicest community, the demand is still there. Where I'm seeing things slow down a little bit and maybe the community's offering more in the way of incentives are in areas where most of my buyers balk. They walk in, they look at it, they don't have the floor plan, they don't like the community, they don't like the area, whatever their reasons are. People, generally speaking, with my clientele, is that they tend to land at the same places and the demand is still very strong. And I don't think in those places, although they're offering some incentives that weren't here a year ago, they're not necessarily giving anything away. And so for folks who are at home trying to time it perfectly, you can't time it perfectly. You just have to ask yourself, every month that you wait is one more month living where you're living right now and not being here. And you're paying state income tax every month that you're there, that's money that you could have done something else with, right? So I think at some point, you have done your due diligence, you've examined all these places, and you just have to make a move. You got to make a bold move. My son and I, we always quote Latin, fortune favors the brave. You got to do it. You just got to take the plunge. And honestly, look behind me, like, not there.
Yeah, I think on kind of what you alluded to was, the second thing beyond the demand, and which directly correlates, is that new home incentives are probably the biggest thing we're seeing right now. Is, What's interesting about these guys is, one, I still think they're a little arrogant. Now, I don't think they're big businesses, right? Like, they've done a lot of business in the last 3 years. They don't need to give stuff away. But the fact of the matter is their margin was far too high for how they were working. So there is stuff to give away. They're trying to find out what you care about. So the reason you see closing costs 1 month, free lot another month, they're trying to find your trigger, right? So that being said, there is a portfolio of triggers that you might not be aware of. Obviously, we can help you navigate that. A ton of communities to sift through.
Yep.
But what I would at least do is I would make sure you feel like you know all the options before you do something, because there's a lot more options than are on the internet random sphere, and definitely a lot more than the person that works at the builder is going to tell you, because there's not a lot of incentive there. But new construction incentives are very real. If you're looking to do something, and to Dave's point, there's no reason to wait for a windfall, because what is the opportunity cost of waiting 3 months to save 10 grand in principal of a home at an interest rate that's changing, that's going to matter $17 a month, if you spend all that money on taxes of what you're already paying for now? So you got to really look at the full thing if you're going to look at opportunity cost. But if someone's giving you away, someone gets in a weird spot, Toll Brothers stock drops, and they give you $40,000 in cash-related cost, then you should really look at that and say, what's the long-term effect of that, even if the house is too expensive? So all I'm saying is I'd be aware of it, and I've seen more than I've ever seen in the past. I actually think they're still a little arrogant. Waiting for them to like get rid of that arrogance, I don't think it's ever going to happen. But being able to like actually negotiate behind the scenes with someone that is just doing more transactions might be useful.
And another thing too is, if you've been sitting on the sideline for a year or maybe longer trying to decide when you want to make the moves, the day you sign your contract on new construction, you're still not coming down for 12 to 14 months, depending on how long it's going to take to build the house. So in your mind, it's like when you finally get to the point where you say, yeah, I'm ready to go, doesn't mean you're moving in 30 days. You know, you may be moving down here and renting, but you're not going to be in your house for, it could be up to a year or more, depending on what kind of build you're doing. So, you know, if you're sincere about, yeah, I want to get down to Florida, think about your timeline and understand that new construction is going to take probably a year.
Yeah. And I think, so we're seeing the same with mortgage discounts as well. But I think just the overall ceiling of this whole point, just to bring it home, is I think it's a market where knowing more is more useful than I've seen it in a really long time. I mean, having an understanding of resale communities that are nearby, because these build times are 18 months at normal neighborhoods. You might not even like the house after 18 months. Like it's getting kind of wild. So understanding like if there's no listings at a neighborhood that would have been an awesome neighborhood, you're not aware of it because you're looking on MLS. There's just nothing on the market. Understanding what you could have done before you sign a new home would be useful. Even signing a new construction home, which most of our people choose, and you're right, it's the same 10 neighborhoods. Knowing the other alternatives, I think, helps you make a non-regrets decision. And in a market where regrets are dangerous and sad, is if you're going to make a leap and you're going to like trust that decision, to Dave's point, is I think having a good understanding of, I knew all the information I could possibly know at this moment when I made that decision, then that's all you can do, and that's all anyone can do, would be very helpful. All right, folks, that is a wrap for this video. Really hope you enjoyed the format. If you did, please consider subscribing and liking the video. If you need any real estate assistance at all, please reach out. We'll put all our contact information here. I can put you directly in contact with Dave if that's someone that you feel like you can really relate to. And finally, the website, thesunshinestateco.com. We'll put the URL right here. We have free resources. We have tools. We have MLS searches with special logins just for you and much, much more. Thank you again for watching. We'll see you in the next one.